reason that I'm here is because the club is seeking change.
He said, well, whether you come or not, you're going to see a completely different Spurs team under me.
My hope and my desire and what I'm going to try and do is give our supporters hope and belief that we're going to embark on something special.
Welcome into the Tottenham Depot. I am your host, Andrew. You can follow me at Astedka. You can follow us at Tottenham Depot. This is episode 202. A little bit of good, a little bit of bad to talk about on this one. We've got Scott alongside to do it with. He is at Scott G. Bird. Scott, how are you on this fine Sunday?
Not too bad. Could be better if the result was a little bit better, right? But it's just football. So yeah, doing well.
Yeah, man, this was a tough one to stomach. We are recording this about 15 minutes after the full-time whistle with Crystal Palace getting a 1-0 victory over Spurs at Selhurst Park. We are, of course, going to chop it up about that one. We are also going to talk about the Thursday result, a 1-0 victory over AZ Alkmaar. Lots of kind of just going on in the world of Spurs this week. We've got Sonny kind of in and out of things, and Mikey Moore, a glow up there, but let's dive into this. Before we do, I do want to remind our viewers on the YouTube page, youtube.com/Tottenham Depot, and our listeners that we are delighted to be partnered up with Digital Spurs. Digital Spurs is artwork that is put to your favorite apparel, including t-shirts, hoodies, sweatshirts, hats, so much more. Danny Garrison creates these pieces, which we do love so very much. I am rocking a Tottenham Till I Die hat today from Digital Spurs. I see Scott has a Tottenham golf hat on as well. Head to digitalspurs.com, find your new favorite merch, and let them know that we here at the Tottenham Depot sent you. And yes, if you are watching on the YouTube page, a little bit of a different look for me today. I am on vacation in Orlando, Florida with the family, so I've ducked away, got a little area here in the kitchen where I can bang out a pod with my boy Scott here. I was hoping it would be a little happier, but let's start with the happy, I guess. Spurs did play on Thursday in the Europa League, a 1-0 victory over Alkmaar. This was a heavily rotated side, Scott. We saw Fraser Forster in goal, which ironically enough may be like a bright spot to talk about from this game because he was actually kind of good. We saw, the likes of Gray and Ben Davis. We also saw Mikey Moore, who kind of started in this one and then obviously got a second straight start in the Palace match, which we'll come on to. But just kind of overall, what was your takeaway? This was, you look at the scoreline and you think, oh, a 1-0 victory over, this Dutch team that nobody would have thought too much of. But I thought this was a really one of those, even though it was a home match, it was kind of one of those gritty Europa League victories that this team has become accustomed to getting. Obviously 3 from 3 to start this Europa League campaign. And I kind of just thought, despite not scoring from open play, of course, the goal came on a penalty from Richarlison in the 53rd minute. Despite all of that, I thought this was a really good performance from a rotated side that never really felt that out of control, right?
Yeah, I mean, ton of changes. Obviously, the center back pairing flips. Archie Gray comes in. As you already said, Mikey Moore gets a start up top, and Richarlison gets a start up top. So tons of rotation, and I think ultimately these Europa League group stage matches are more about the result than the performance when you rotate so heavily. I mean, obviously you want to see that your pieces that you rotate in, we could say, do perform well and play within the system, but ultimately when you rotate that many pieces, you're looking to get a result more so than a performance. And that's what we did, albeit it did take a penalty, as you've mentioned, right, to get that result. But I thought we played fine. As you said, Mikey was fantastic. He was all over the pitch, playing with full confidence and just willing to take on anything that came in front of him, which we love to see. I was almost going to say we don't see that as often, but I think we're starting to see that from the majority of the squad. But we certainly saw it from Mikey on Thursday. But like I said, my biggest takeaway is that we got a result. I think when you rotate that many pieces, the bigger picture, we call Ange ball, whatever it is, becomes less in focus for me, and it's all about what happens on that day, and we got it done.
Yeah, I think that you hit the nail on the head in terms of the rotation. This is going to be what Spurs do to get through the Europa League. It's gonna have to be that way. 3 matches played already, obviously 5 to go in this stage, but currently Spurs sit second on the table. You have to finish in the top 8 to automatically get into the further knockout round. And then they also take, the next 16 after that. So really you've got to be in the top 24 out of the 36 teams. Spurs sit second through 3 games. That's a pretty good start, with all of the matches being victories. I did look and realize that the wins are against Karabag, who currently sits DFL after three matches, and then the other 2. Alkmaar obviously sits 24th in that last qualification spot, and then Ferencváros sits 1 spot above them. So it's not like Spurs have faced the heaviest of hitters in the Europa League, but when you're rotating aside and doing what they're doing, it's, for me at least, it's completely fine. The schedule does get a little bit tougher just in terms of the fixture list in the Europa League. They do have Galatasaray next away. That'll be a tough one. They also have Roma at home toward the end of November. That will obviously be a fairly tough one. And then that trip to Rangers comes up in mid-December as well. So the Europa League games are actually going to start to get spread out a little bit more. We've had 3 of them. Won't have another one now until the 7th of November. So a week off. Obviously, the League Cup match comes up at midweek this week, then back into the Europa League. But then not another one until Thanksgiving Day here in the States, the 28th. That's the Roma match. And then not another one until the 12th. So you're going to get a little bit of space here as the Premier League fixtures and the League Cup fixtures kind of come into focus. But I guess just the grander takeaway from the Europa League standing is that it couldn't be better. Obviously, it's 3 wins from 3, and you're getting it done while rotating, while dealing with, little knocks to players here and there. Sonny being the main one to think about. And I agree with you. Look, I'll admit, when I saw Fraser Forster in goal for this match, I thought, oh boy, but he was probably the man of the match for me. I mean, I thought he made a lot of really good saves, and for as much as we've kind of maligned Fraser Forster's even his existence on this roster over the likes of Jed Spence, props to him. Like I have to kind of wear it a little bit. Like, this was a good performance.
Yeah, Fraser was great. Three key saves in that match that you can argue get us the result, right? So yeah, Fraser was great. I was really happy for him, and excuse me, credit to Ange for giving him the start. I don't think that Vicario necessarily needs that rotation, right? But Ange made the decision to give Fraser some minutes and give Vicario a rest. And even if Vicario doesn't need a physical day off, a mental day off, maybe is good for him. So I have a lot of respect for Ange for making that decision, and a lot of respect for Big Frazier for showing up and putting in a really good shift.
I want to ask you about Mikey Moore, because I know you've been a real proponent of his. It was a great performance on Thursday, and we can kind of tie it a little bit into the Palace one, where he makes his first Premier League start, and actually became, I believe I heard he was the youngest Spurs player to start a Premier League game since 1993, which is just like mind-blowing.
Yeah.
I glanced at Mikey Moore's birth date. It was a couple of months after I graduated high school, which made me feel really old this morning when I recognized that. But Mikey Moore, what do you make of what he did on Thursday? It was obviously a really strong performance, yet in a game where Spurs kind of needed to scrap and claw and really fight to get their goal.
Yeah, Mikey was great, especially on Thursday. I think he was good today too against Palace, and we'll get to that. But he was fantastic on Thursday. Like I said, he took on everything. I think it's just that fearlessness and comfortability on the ball that is very rare to see from somebody who's 17 years old. But every time the ball was at his feet, the stadium stood up, and people expected magic from him, and they got it. It really just seems like he's the type of guy who you can go play football, and you don't have to tell them much more than that, right? His instincts really benefit him, and seem to put him in the right positions. And I think anytime you have someone that young, it's really dangerous. And we talk about, you've got to ease these guys in correctly, and you can't put too much on them and put too much in front of them. And last season, Mikey Moore got some minutes and just looked well off the pace and kind of lost, and as if his head was spinning, right? So I did question this season what the jump for him would look like from those limited minutes at the tail end of last season to this season. But he's clearly ready to be an impactful player and deliver for Ange right now, albeit he is 17 years old. So I couldn't be more excited about what's to come. And I think as we saw today, you got to keep getting him minutes and letting him continue to develop. I don't think we have to worry so much with Mikey Moore about easing a youngster in and not putting too much in front of them, because I think he's ready to go and be an impactful player from the jump right now.
Yeah, and obviously that was that kind of played out in the match against Palace, which I want to come on to that decision when we talk more about that game. But before we move on from Thursday's affair, it was really like I was kind of like I had to kind of eat some crow about Fraser Forster. I fully expected Troy Parrott to come into this match and have a brace and break our hearts. It was nice to see the defense be able to stop Troy Parrott. Nice seeing him back. Nice seeing the success that he's having. But nice that he didn't do it in this match as well. There was a little bit of a moment in this match when the penalty was about to be taken, where it looked like James Maddison was over the ball and Richarlison wanted it, and then Maddison eventually gave the ball up. But what did you take anything from that? Because I saw there was some things online, like some consternation about I don't know, there were words being thrown out, leadership and all these kinds of things. James Maddison, something weird's going on perhaps with him of late. He's been subbed off in a few matches and was subbed off again today against Palace. And I don't know. I think James Maddison's been playing really brilliantly, but this was a bit of a weird moment in this match the other day for me. Did you have any take on it?
Yeah, I mean, I think in the moment, I thought that Maddison was going to come in and take it, and then when I saw Richarlison take it, I thought it was probably just Maddison trying to play some sort of mind game with the keeper, or maybe keep the mind games from being played against Richarlison, right? So he gives the impression that he's going to take it, and once everything's said and settled, you hand the ball off to Richarlison and let him step up and take it. But Maddison actually came out, and I'm not sure if you saw his quotes after the match, but he was interviewed and he said, I'm very much paraphrasing here, but he said, I'm a leader on this team and I'm one of the senior players today. And I was going to take the penalty. And I remembered after a significant injury last season, how long it took me to get back on the score sheet. And then once I did, how much it did for my confidence. And so as a leader, I said, Richie just got back. Why don't I actually give him this ball and let him jumpstart his confidence? So credit to Maddison for making that decision, and credit to Richie for putting the penalty away. It was a really cool finish. He obviously waited and paused long enough to let the keeper make a decision. And like Mighty Ducks 3 says so eloquently, make them make the first move, Conway. And that's what Richarlison did so well, and put it away. So yeah, I was really happy for him. And yeah, this Maddison situation's a little bit tricky. I think he's been good, maybe even great at times, right? He's looked to be in form, but he has made way a few times, and I think it's tactical more than anything. I think Kulusevski and Maddison are giving Ange a bit of a headache, and albeit Kulusevski kind of dropped a stinker today against Palace, but all of that aside, right? He's been really good and put Ange in a position where he probably just had no choice but to take Maddison off to get Sarr on the pitch. You've got to have Basuma or Bentancur in for sure as a six, right? And so I think unfortunately Maddison just been kind of a victim of tactical requirements.
Yeah, it's been an interesting mix with both Kulusevski and Maddison playing in those kind of dueling number 10 roles, and I like it, but obviously, and you alluded to it, against Palace, it's simply everything kind of seemed to go wrong against Palace, which we'll come on to. But before we fully move on from the Alkmaar match, I do just want to note it was nice to see Wilson Odebear get back on the pitch, even just in a brief moment, coming on for Mikey Moore. Odebear then was not in the team for the Premier League match, not fit enough to turn it around, but I'm hoping that we can get him back into this rotation, because quite honestly, from a winger standpoint, this team, when at full strength, is loaded for bear. I mean, you've got the likes of Kulusevski, who can play out there. You've got Brennan Johnson, who's had obviously a great season. If Sonny can get back to full strength, we know what the captain is capable of doing. And then you've got Moore and Odebear and Werner all kind of vying for minutes as well. And I just think that's really good depth, and also not only depth, but there's a lot of variety in the style of play for all of those players, which I think is a good thing. And you can have Ange kind of mix and match. But like I said, the Europa League campaign is off to a great start. It's 3 from 3 and 5 to go in the group stage. So I think if you can, if you can win 3 more of those and maybe get a draw in the other 2, even I don't even think the requirements will be to win every match. You've just got to make sure that you're in that top 8 to get yourself, essentially the bye into the next round, and not have to play that qualifying round. So that would really, really be great. Shifting gears to this Palace match, like the lineup is what is kind of what it's always been, except for this almost rotating left wing spot because of who's healthy and who's not. So Sonny misses out on this one. Timo Werner, I would have expected to start, but no, instead he throws another start to Mikey Moore, and that's all well and good. But quite honestly, I don't know. I don't know that there was anything tactically wrong with anything that Ange tried to do in this match against Palace. Maybe you would disagree, but I just thought this was a really piss poor effort from the 11 players on the pitch. Like, they'd seem to have, some of them obviously played a few days ago. This is not a cakewalk going down to Selhurst Park. I know Palace had not won a match before this, but this is still always kind of one of those fixtures that you can stub your toe on, and that is exactly what this team did today.
Yeah, we were terrible today. Absolutely awful. I personally think Ange got the midfield wrong, and I was actually really surprised to see both Maddison and Kulusevski start with Bissouma. I think Bissouma's much more effective with Sarr. I think Bissouma struggles when he's in that singular pivot, and even with Sarr, he kind of is, but Sarr really complements him in a way that almost becomes a double pivot at times. I thought that was a lot of why maybe even we hadn't seen Bissouma as much, because Sarr was still kind of getting back to form, and as was Bissouma, right? But when Sarr didn't start on Thursday and Maddison did, I suspected that was because we would see Sarr, Kulusevski, and Bissouma today. I really thought Sarr would have given us just a little bit, I don't want to say muscle, right? Because that's not necessarily what he brings, but just he would have given us more control in the midfield. And I think that's mainly through the ground that he covers and his work rate and his ability to play box to box, because I do think we lost the midfield battle today. And I was pretty surprised to see Sarr not come on for either Maddison or Kulusevski at halftime. So again, I do think Ange probably got the midfield wrong. And again, I'm nowhere near the quality of Ange Postecoglou when it comes to being a tactician and all of that, right? But I was very surprised by Sarr not getting the start. But ultimately, I agree. I think we saw 11 guys that were not up for it today, and complacency is probably the word. Anytime you're seemingly on a good run of results and you're coming up against a team who has just frankly been awful. Just they've been terrible this season. I think on form, I know Wolves are below them in the table, right? Before today's match, but on form, Palace have easily been the worst team in the league. And I watched them Monday against Forest, and they just looked like they didn't belong in the Premier League, right? So I think we probably came into this match complacent, thinking that we were up against a weakened side, and turns out we were the weak inside, and it really showed. We just had absolutely nothing from front to back, and very poor decision making. The goal that Mateta scores, I couldn't tell you what in the world Romero is thinking.
Well, there's multiple victims of absurdity on that. I mean, what Van de Ven is doing as well in the lack of being able to clear the ball. The pass to him was not great, but he still should have been able to just either hoof it away. I mean, I don't know what those guys were thinking. And look, you're right about Palace. Like they're a team that mucks it up, but this is I think part of the problem, and this is going to speak to your midfield point as well. Like when teams have the ability to muck it up against Spurs, like Palace did in this match, I think that's where this team is most vulnerable because they aren't able to get into their free-flowing Ange ball style of honestly, the lack of the ability to just complete a damn pass in this match was staggering from everyone. Statistically, when you kind of look at it, it's not. I mean, the numbers are not nearly as bad as it actually looked to watch this match. The first, 30 to 35 minutes of this game were an absolute snooze fest. I mean, both teams didn't seem to even want to play football. And to your point, that midfield, I think that, we have seen some success with this exact combination, Basuma, Kulusevski, and Madison. Part of the problem in this one for me was Kulusevski, and I was actually surprised, and I think the commentary team doing the game was surprised as well, that because Kulusevski had already been booked when it came to make subs and came to bring Sarr on, I was surprised that it was Madison going off and not Kulusevski. Once Madison came off, and this is not, I'm not trying to blow smoke up James Madison's ass. He doesn't need that from me. But once Madison came off, I was kind of convinced we weren't scoring, like unless something really, really weird happened, because I didn't see Kulusevski with the ability to create in the same way that Madison was throughout this match.
100%. I think Ange got it horribly wrong taking both Kulusevski and Madison off. I don't know where we expect the creativity to come from at that point. I certainly don't expect it from Timo Werner, and I think Timo can put a good cross in, and maybe with two strikers, you think, bringing Timo on makes sense, which I don't disagree with. I think you can probably bring Timo on without sacrificing both of your central attacking midfielders, to be completely honest. But I just don't know where we expect the creativity to come from, because Brennan Johnson and Timo Werner are both players who are going to be most effective at the end of a play and not in any sort of buildup or creative aspect of a play. When you switch to a 4-2-2-2 or a 4-4-2 or whatever you want to call it, right, and you don't have a central attacking midfielder or an attacking playmaker, we could say you have Sarr and Basuma on the field. The creativity has to come from the wings at that point. It's just pretty standard football tactics, right? And neither of them are capable of providing, again, creativity in the buildup. They're more guys who can be effective at the end of a play and with that final product. And frankly, Timo's final product has been non-existent. Brennan's has been great, right? But we still have to have enough creativity to get to that point. And I didn't understand what the plan was when neither Kulusevski or Madison was on the pitch. It just didn't make sense to me. So frankly, again, I hate picking on Ange because I think he's a fantastic manager, but I think Ange fumbled the ball a couple of times today. First in his team selection, and then second with his in-game management, which frankly, again, I'll use that word. I don't think Ange's in-game management has been great this season, and I think today was another example of that. So
it's interesting. We had some comments this week with people getting on us about being critical of the manager. I have no problem being critical of the manager. I also I do want to recognize that we don't fully know the extent of what goes on in terms of the availability of players, let's just say. That's not something that I'm gonna try and speculate on or figure out for myself. I don't know. for example, I don't know how many minutes Richarlison was supposed to even have in him today, and he comes on, and I thought, he gave it his best college try. I just some of these guys. I mean, he's only making 4 subs in a match like this where it looked so bad, and they're playing short on the bench. They're just there's a little bit of a puzzle piece problem, I think, here for Ange as well at times, especially in that midfield, which we talk about so much, just because there are so many different moving parts in it. I do like to think that he had perhaps an eye on a midweek match and then another league match next weekend, and just trying to get guys back and healthy. But I can't really disagree in the sense that when you see a match going this poorly, and again, this is at the surface, it's a Crystal Palace problem because they are so adept at mucking it up in the way that they did. But Spurs have to be able to look, if you can do it against Alkmaar on a Thursday and muck it up against a team that is lesser than, you've got to also be able to do it against a team. And I'm not in any way saying Alkmaar are as talented as Crystal Palace. I'm sure that Crystal Palace would have something to say about that, but you got to be able to do it against a Crystal Palace team that has threats. I mean, Eze, Sarr, and Mateta is not a weak front three, and those guys caused problems at times. But even more so, the midfield. And when you talk about the midfield being overwhelmed and overrun, I don't think that's the fault of any one individual player. Like you said, it's more about how you set it up. And we talk ad nauseum too about this difference between Ange's plan A and plan B, and how different really are they. Would you have wanted to see just a shape change for as much as they had in midfield today? Because that is kind of where it felt like Spurs just lost the footing.
It's interesting, and I'm glad you bring that up, because it's kind of where I wanted to go. Is Palace came out and they pressed the shit out of us today, which I don't think anyone would have expected. They did 2 things really well today. They pressed really well, and they stayed compact at the back really well. Glasner, I got to give a lot of credit to. Again, they've been horrible this season, and he's got to make adjustments, which he did today. But he seems to have understood that if you defend well and you stay compact in the block, we're going to have a hard time breaking you down, which historically this season we have in every aspect, or every instance of that happening, right? But I also think that there was an opportunity, and I don't know if he came in with this strategy or if he recognized it early and implemented, or when the team sheets came out and implemented. But when you don't have Sarr and you have Madison and Kulusevski both on the pitch with a Basuma, I do think you become less press resistant. I think Kulusevski's very press resistant. I think Basuma is fairly press resistant, but I don't think Madison is. I think Sarr is for sure. And I think Glasner probably saw an opportunity to really lay the press on us and see what we could do with it. And we weren't able to get the ball out of our own half for almost all of the first half, right? And then, as we always do, we go down 1, and then we start to kind of figure it out and start to take more risks. So it was like early season shades of Spurs, right? Before we found this ability to play really well in a direct fashion, right? That directness was non-existent today. I do think, kind of off the path here, all this talk is Son washed. Do we need to move on from Son? I think today tells us that that's nonsense. Without Son on the pitch, I think we lose some of that ability to play direct football. And that's not a discredit to Mikey Moore. But I think Mikey Moore is definitely a winger who is more capable of coming back and helping us build up and move the ball up the field, right? With the ball at his feet, where Son frankly isn't. And Son needs to be up high, riding the back line, ready to break in a direct fashion. So we're missing Son today too. But ultimately, I think Glasner came out with a really good strategy and absolutely beat the pants off of us today. And we're talking about Ange and all of that. I think right now, if someone asked me, have Spurs gotten better since last season? I think the answer is no. I think we've shown moments where we look like we're maybe starting to figure it out, right? You can look at West Ham. They did us some favors too, but we dropped points at Leicester. We got beat by Newcastle. We got beat by Arsenal. We've now been beat by Crystal Palace. We've been beat by Brighton, and we haven't played very many games, right? So what is it, 10, 11, 12 matches off the top of my head, right? And there's maybe not even that many. We could go and count, but
yeah, 9.
So 9 matches, right?
9 in the league, obviously.
So 9 league matches. And again, I'm going to go through. Poor result against Leicester, poor result against Newcastle, poor result against Arsenal, poor result against Brighton, poor result against Crystal Palace. So 5 of your 9 matches are poor results, 4 of them being losses, and 1 of them a draw at Leicester, who's probably the weakest side in the league when it comes to talent. It doesn't look good, and that's where I say I do not think that we've gotten better as a team, and that's on the manager. There's no other way to put it, right? If your team's not getting better, that always falls to the feet of the person in charge, and has some things to figure out for sure.
It's 4 wins and 4 defeats and 1 draw from those 9. You're exactly right. You have to be winning more games than you don't in order to be successful. As we're recording this, we are getting some quotes from the manager following the match, and this is, I think, something else I wanted to touch on from this game. And I think he's articulating, because he's the manager of the club and he was there. He's articulating it a little better than I was able to. I said Crystal Palace were mucking it up, and that's kind of what they do. But Ange, after the match, speaking to BBC Match of the Day, he says, quote, "It was one of those games with a lot of stoppages and battles, and they ended up winning a lot of them and coming out on top. There was a lot of disruption, and it was hard to get any fluency. They did better than us," end quote. This is kind of what I was alluding to, is Spurs. And look, this is going to fall on the manager as well, but it's also going to fall on the players. This game was so herky-jerky and stop-start. There was no fluidity to it. There was no motion in which Ange would want his players to be able to play. But that's kind of the pain that I have with this team, is that when they face, and this goes to a much larger DNA conversation that I'm sure we can have because we have it all the time as Spurs fans, but you've got to be able to win different types of games if you want to call yourself a successful club. It can't be that everything has to go your way for your type of attack and defense to work in sync and together. This was one of those matches where things aren't going swimmingly and Spurs just kind of folded. And that's, I think, what is most disappointing for me, to continually have to grab a microphone and say, that's the part that has to change. You've got to be able to win multiple different types of games. You don't have to be able to win every single type of game. You're going to be vulnerable in some spots, but the second Spurs get kind of knocked off their track, they don't always seem to have the best way back to getting back on it. I know we've seen, like West Ham, for example, that didn't look great at first, but then all of a sudden they turned it on, they got it back on track. But this was the type of match that against a far inferior team that they should have been able to, at the very least, you've got to be able to get a point out of this match. And they couldn't even manage to get a goal. I went over some of or maybe I didn't even, some of the statistics. This match was very, very even from a statistical standpoint. In fact, Spurs had much more of the ball, 66% of it. They had, only 3 fewer shots on goal. That was part of the problem that I saw, was that they just weren't getting into shooting positions with the ball, which I feel like is something we constantly harp on with this club. But that's just kind of some of the frustrations that I'm venting, because this is such a damn it feels like a repetitive story with this club, where they go and lose matches like this all the damn time. So anything else you wanted to get off your chest on that before we kind of look forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we saw all kinds of stuff on Twitter and other social medias this week about, Dr. Tottenham will see you now, Crystal Palace and Spursy and all of that. And while it irritates me, and I would highly advise fans to gravitate away from that, right? there is a reason why fans feel that way, and Spurs just have a tendency to again not show up and show complacency in these matches where more astute teams would just kind of put Palace to the sword and brush them to the side, right? And they would do so by saying super focused and diligent and dedicated to the plan. I talk about it, and I probably have before on this show, but being up for a match does not mean you're like more hyped up and more just like excited and ready to go. It means you're more like calm and dialed in and present in the moment, right? And that seems to be something that we really struggle with, and it's frustrating. I saw a stat on Twitter today, and it comes from @Yidvids, who I'm sure some folks are familiar with. But if you look at the past 38 matches, and that doesn't mean a single season, that means the past 38 matches from today through the past 38 matches, all of course, Ange Postecoglou, we've taken 56 points. That points total is smaller or lesser than any manager from Juan de Ramos forward their last 38 matches before they were sacked. So the stat is that Ange's last 38 matches have seen less points brought in than any manager back to Juande, who ended up getting sacked for the run of form, right? So again, I'm not saying Ange should be sacked at all, nowhere near saying that, but I'm saying Ange has work to do because, again, we're not getting better. I'm not seeing progression. We are in the midst of a project. And I do also recognize, I feel bad saying this because I don't want to pick on anyone that wears the shirt, but we have aspirations of winning the Premier League and blah, blah, blah. Today up top, we started a 17-year-old and we started Brendan Johnson. And I think Brendan Johnson's a great footballer, but I don't think he's going to come in and make the impact that is required week in and week out to win a Premier League title, right? And a 17-year-old is certainly not going to do that. So Ange has some hurdles in his way. He's handcuffed in some sense, and we're going to continue to bring players in. We've also brought players in who are very young, right? It's not that we haven't gone out and continued to build the squad, but we've done it in a way that's probably much more so for the future than it is for right now, which bleeds in to things like today's result, right? So there's a lot going on, and in no way, shape, or form do I think we're going to win the Premier League. But what I do expect is for us to get better, and I'm just unfortunately not in a position to say that I believe we're getting better at all right now.
It's certainly a long journey. Like I think that's the other thing. Like, Brendan Johnson has been good, and they brought in Dominic Solanke, who I think has been really good. In fact, I really liked what I saw from Dominic Solanke dropping deeper in this match and trying to create some things. I'll continue to heap all the praise that I can on the season that Solanke is having. And then with Moore, this is what the people wanted to see, right? Like, people are going to be really excited by Mikey Moore getting a start, despite only being a literal child.
Yeah.
But I get what you're saying about the aspirations to do bigger and better things, but this is a long path that we're on, and I think that's just the hard part to kind of swallow, is that people want success and want it now. And look, we all do, but they're finally on this path. Look, a lot of the success that this team could find and would want would be facing a really, really intense roadblock this coming Wednesday, because the League Cup match against Manchester City comes up, and I don't really know what to make of this match, to be perfectly honest. I described it as a free hit in my mind in the group chat a little bit earlier. I don't know how intense City are going to come out for this thing. I know the likes of, I think I saw Grealish has already been ruled out through injury, and someone else even. Like, they're not going to have a full strength team coming into this match, but I certainly don't think Spurs are either, having to look forward to another weekend Premier League match on Sunday. So there's going to be some rotation, but give me your quick take on the importance of this League Cup match, because I'm going to piss some people off by saying this. I don't think it's that important of a match.
Yeah, I mean, I think if we look at anything we hope to accomplish this season, it's certainly not the Premier League. And if we want to go after a trophy, I think the League Cup is probably the best way to make that happen. Maybe the Europa League is, and that's silly to say because the Europa League requires a lot more in terms of victories acquired, right? But you also don't have Man City or Arsenal or I was going to say Man United, but they are there and they're not very good. But you get my point. There's much less stiff competition in the Europa League as compared to the League Cup. So, I don't think we have to put all our eggs in this basket, but I do think that it's important for us to make a run in this cup. It's unfortunate that we come up against City as early as we do, but we're not here to complain or play woe as me because you have to just win games in front of you. So I probably place more importance on this match than you do. But I also don't expect to get a result out of this match. And I hate to be a pessimist, but if you look at what we saw today, there's just no way you could comfortably expect to go in and get a result against Manchester City. The only silver lining could be that we have a tendency to play a little bit better when there's less pressure, and that's a massive problem. I'm not saying that that's a good thing, right? But the fact of the matter is we do play better when there's less pressure, and there's probably less pressure in this match. So maybe that benefits us in terms of the performance that we put in. But City is probably the best team in the world, and right now we're a pretty average Premier League team at best, and the table shows that. So yeah, I don't expect much from this match. If we're going to get anything, it's going to have to be from more senior players. And I know we've moved on from Palace, but I'll go back just one more time. The senior players like Romero, Van de Ven is young, right? But he's a leader, at least in terms of ability. I look at Madison. I look at Kulusevski. Those guys were horrible today, and they're going to have to be much better on Wednesday if we want to, be close to getting anything out of this match.
And you speak to leadership as well. Some more quotes coming out following this match, because like I said, we are recording shortly after the match ended, or at least we started recording shortly after the match has ended. It's been over for about an hour now, but Guglielmo Vicario, speaking to Sky Sports, says, quote, "They fight, and I think we lacked that today. We're disappointed because we have to fight. We play good football, but maybe sometimes we lack the desire to fight. They showed a real desire to fight for something." That says it all right now, and like I'm glad to hear recognition of that. And I saw some video going around of Vicario kind of going over to the traveling fans and almost putting his hands up, like apologizing for their performance today. And that is going to be a big part of it. Speaking about Wednesday, I obviously I want to see Spurs go win the game, and obviously it helps that it is at home, where Spurs have had some success against Manchester City over the years. But I think it's just one of those matches you go out there and you see what you get to if you can get yourself to the 65, 70-minute mark and see if you're in the match and see what happens. We'll kind of see how that goes. But I'm certainly going to be interested in how he plays this. It'll be interesting too to see the health of the team. If we're talking about Sonny coming back, perhaps Odegaard coming back, just trying to get some more bodies ready. Because as they say, the matches are going to be coming thick and fast over the next handful of weeks and months because of just the fixture pileup in the Premier League, but also those Europa League games that I talked about. And if they can continue to advance in the League Cup, obviously that would be really, really big. So yeah, Spurs host Manchester City on Wednesday, the 4th round of the League Cup. And then next Sunday, Spurs will host Aston Villa in Premier League action. That is not going to be any kind of an easy match either. So it does not get any easier. As for Spurs women this week, obviously international break on the women's side, but they are also back in action next Sunday. They are at home against West Ham United. Unfortunately for us Spurs fans, both the men's and women's matches next Sunday, I believe at the same time. So that's another one of those kind of pain in the ass situations that we're going to have to deal with, but we will return to talk about all of that from the week. As for Scott, you can follow him at Scott G. Bird. You can follow me at @ACeDetka. And again, you can follow us at Tottenham Depot. Be sure to check out our episodes, by the way, on our YouTube page, youtube.com/Tottenham Depot. We are posting them all up there for you to watch in case you like to do that sort of thing instead of just listening. You can get a little bit more interactive with us and leave a comment there as well. Follow us on all the socials at Tottenham Depot. Until next week, this has been the Tottenham Depot podcast. As always, come on, you Spurs.